All right, so let's put genetics. Genetics and heredity. This is the connection between your genes and traits. Okay, so that's what we're going to look at. Is now we're going to take all this information. We're going to talk about DNA forever, it seems like, and we're going to now figure out, well, why in the world do I have this shape of eyeballs, or why do I have this kind of hair, or why do I have this not only color of hair but texture of hair, or how tall I am, or so forth. So we're going to call this Genetics 101. A lot of this is review from 7th grade. But what I find is, there we go. So there appears to be something wrong. Let's see if that's working. Okay. But it goes back to what I said yesterday. If you know the vocabulary, it's like math. It makes a lot more sense of how we learn genetics. Either people love it sometimes, or I hear people say, I just didn't get it. Well, I want everybody 100% to understand how to do these problems and to do this. And so in the end, you'll have several of these on your exam, but I want you to be able to do it all, but understand the concept. So, all right, we're going to start off with genetics. So, all right, so genetics is the study of heredity. And this is where, if you learn by color, grab a highlighter, and I would highlight these words as we go, because they will build a vocabulary list in the notes. So this will be our next word. Okay, so heredity. And this is the passage of genes from parents to offspring. And I could put parent, let's put that in parentheses, because why? Why would I say parent or parents?
It could be asexual or sexual.
Right. It could be asexual or sexual. So we don't know. So parent or parents to offspring. So we won't say babies, but you know, we think of our offspring as babies. But if you're a fungus, we don't say those little fungi babies. We just say, well, those offspring. So if I'm passing it, so think of a parent passing a football. You know, they each throw a football to this individual, and they both receive. So they're passing them to them. So the next word is receiving those traits, and that's when you inherit them. So y'all think of an inheritance. If you inherit something, what's that mean? Yeah, you get it. So this is the passing it on from the parents to the offspring, and then inheritance is that you actually get them. So inheritance is receiving your genes from your parents. Okay. So you pass them on and then you receive them. So there's two other words. Actually, maybe there's one word. There's some right over there in that can. There's several. So the next word is going to be gene, and we've had this before. So tell me what a gene is in your mind, and from what you've learned, conceptually, what is a gene? When y'all think of genes. What's a gene?
DNA from the parents, like, it's like one side and one side from the parents.
Yeah. So you get DNA from your parents, and then where are those genes found? What are the packages that we said of genes? And you guys had to find 3 genes on one of those. You have 46 of them. Chromosomes. So we know a lot about genes already. So those are sections. Sections. Let's see. A section. Gosh, come on. A section of DNA, which are actually nucleotides. Okay, so we said it's like A, C, T, A, or G, and so forth. Okay, that is a recipe or a blueprint for a trait. Okay, which we said would end up being a protein. Okay, so that goes back to protein synthesis. So we started with the DNA, then you had to make the RNA, then you had to make the protein at the ribosome. So we said the genes are found on chromosomes. So they're inherited chromosomes. Half from each parent. If it's sexual, all if asexual. Okay, so I'm visual, so I have to have a picture. So we know this is kind of how it goes, and this will lead us to a couple other terms that are going to come up. All right, so let's say this is chromosome number 1. So what do we call the 2 gene or the 2 chromosomes that are the same size and have the same genes? So each of these are identical sisters, and then these 2 chromosomes are homologous, right? Because they pair up during meiosis and swap genes. So let's say that the tip here is an eye color gene. That's the position for eye color. Okay, so let's say that this one is a brown eye color gene. Okay, so one parent gives a brown, and this parent is still an eye color gene, but they are given a different version. They're given a blue. Okay, so what I've done is we're going to assign letters to represent the individual genes. Okay, so, and that's important because when we do the problems, we're going to see all these big A, little a, big B, little b, big B, big B, and we're going to talk all these letters. It sounds like we're having some weird alphabet lesson, but what we're using the letters for is to represent the genes. So big B would be a brown gene, and little b would be a blue gene. Okay, so this diagram right there shows several things that we're going to use. Okay, now we'll pause for a second and ask me any questions. Are there any questions? Because this is critical. Craig, you good?
If you have, like, how do you, okay, so, what I'm trying to say is, like, if you have brown eyes, and then what if you get both big B's? It's not a little B.
Then you're called homozygous brown. Now we're I'm simplifying eye color. I believe there's 3 different separate genes at three separate spots that give you your eye color. So, thank you. Oh, good. So, it's not as simple as this as one position, because you know how we have different shades of eye color? That's why. So there may be a position at chromosome number 1, there might be another gene pair at chromosome number 5, another one on number 9. So the combination of those is what gives you your eye color. So you would have to get a lot of big B's to get brown. Really not a lot, but you would have to get, because it's dominant. So you would get more big B's to give you brown eyes. You have to have a lot of little B's to get you blue eyes. And then there's a combination in between to give you green and hazel.
How do people get like when their eye is more than one color?
That's a mutation. Yeah. So anyway, what we've got here is we're going to use the word trait. That's going to be next. So let's write down trait. And that is an inherited characteristic.
Because my sister was born with purple eyes. Yeah.
Well, there's not a true purple.
Yeah.
There,
I know, but they tend to like a greenish, brownish.
all babies are born with blue eyes, a bluish color. So it's like, it has a bluish hint to it, and it could have just been an illusion. I mean, it's not a true purple, but it's like all of my kids, when they were born, I could tell the blue was going to stay. It was like it had this deeper kind of blue look. But my niece, hers were like a bluish, but it had a different hint of a different color to it. And hers turned, I thought they were going to be green, but they ended up turning brown, you know. Then I've seen people, their eyes turn, my nephew has those fish eyes. They're kind of yellowish, brown, hazel, funky color. And so those, as those genes become expressed, they get turned on, and the pupil, the iris is becoming, all the colors are really being expressed. His just kind of stopped at that hazily, weird kind of look. They're cool eyes. He's still, when you look at him now, they look sometimes green, sometimes hazel. But so anyway, but you've got all these different combinations, and that's because we're going to find it's called a polygenic trait. There's several genes that give you the trait. Okay, so a trait is an inherited characteristic. This is not something you acquire. It's not like changing your eye color, your hair color, and like Net's hair color. She can't pass that on to her kids because it's not in her DNA. So this goes into the word allele or allele, and that is a different form of a trait. Okay, so one second. I'll be right back. Just realized something. Okay, let's do a couple more things and then we'll do your activity. Okay, so allele or different forms of a trait, like brown, or green. Okay, but some of those alleles are dominant and some are recessive. So Annette or Sienna, give us a definition for dominant. What does that mean?
When an allele is dominant, it is expressed in the phenotype over recessive pattern.
Okay, so an allele or gene that I'm going to call takes over or masks a recessive. Okay, so now tell me what you have down for recessive.
In order to have a trait that is expressed by a recessive gene, such as blue eyes, you must get the gene for blue eyes from both of your parents.
Right. Okay, so we're going to use a capital letter to represent a dominant. Okay, capital letter. A recessive, we're using a lowercase letter. So a recessive allele is a gene that can be hidden by a dominant. And like you said, you must get 2 in order to see them or to be expressed. Must receive 2 or get to be expressed. Okay, so we're going to stop and then we'll finish the rest of it afterwards if we've got time. But we need to look at our personal trait lab, okay, which will be the second sheet in your packet. Okay, so what you're going to do, we'll divide into 2 groups, and you guys are going to record the allele you have for each trait, okay? So this we said is a lowercase letter. And we're going to do one of these together. So that way you'll know how this works, and then we'll turn you loose to do your own inventory. We should be able, your goal is to get through the whole list before we leave. Okay. The whole concept of a dominant allele or gene over a recessive is the reason some genes seem to skip a generation. So if you have some traits that make you look more like your grandparents than your own parents, that might be a reason. I have a blue-eyed grandparent on both sides, and neither one of my parents have blue eyes. So it seemed to skip a generation. So, all right. So look at the second sheet, and really, this is the only thing you're going to need because we're so close to the end of the class period. So just pull this out, and that way all you have to do is kind of tuck in your book bag. All right, so let's show you how to do this, and then we'll okay, so you have the traits listed on the inventory on the left-hand column. And we always use a letter to represent the trait of the dominant trait. Okay, so for example, this is what we're gonna do. So number of fingers. So look at your hands. If you have 5 fingers and you've never had 6, that means you didn't even have like a baby one that looked like it was coming off the side that was removed, either on your pinky or your thumb. So what you'll do is if you have 6 fingers, that a D just means that it's a dominant trait, okay? 5 is recessive. So actually to have 6 fingers would be dominant. So because it's dominant, if you have 6 fingers, you're going to put a big S, okay, right here. If you have 5 fingers, you're going to put a little s, okay? I just made a cursive S, or you can just make a little s like that, okay? So I have 5 fingers, so I'm going to put little s for this, okay? Then what you'll do is for your group, so for the 3 of you in your group, you're going to do this. So the number that has big S, you'll put however many, and then the number that has little s, you'll put however many. Okay. All right, so earlobe shape, detached is dominant over attached, being recessive. So we're going to use D's. So big D for detached, we're going to look a little d for attached. Does that make sense? We don't want to use a little a. We're always going to use the letter of the dominant trait. Okay, so what will we do here for cleft chin or the dimple chin?
Big C.
Yep, big C and then a little c. And you really have to make it where you can tell the difference between the letters. That's hard sometimes. So then you're going to put down what you've got, but we're going to try to get through it. I don't know, we may not get them all done. The goal is for your homework, you have to interview 2 people, either family or friends, preferably at least one family member, and whether they're biological or not, one family member, just because it's cool to find out what traits you have like them. And then a family friend, and all you're going to do is record the letter. Okay, if they have 6 fingers, put a big S. If they have 5 fingers, put a little s. And that's all you'll do for each one of these. So when we get down to color, big C, albino is little c. So you may use some of the same letters. It's okay. Okay, it's just whatever the dominant trait is. All right. Does that make sense? Kind of. If not, I'll walk around and make sure that you guys can, if you want to work on it, and then I can, make sure that you're doing it right, that's fine.
What is the PC?